Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My esteemed co-host is Laura Blackwell. And I hope that you're all healthy, safe, and taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. We are shut in. We are still locked down. We're looking for distraction and amusement, and maybe something a little bit more than that. Story Hour turns to the second oldest form of entertainment in human history. Just basically sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. So every week we've got two authors, about 30 minutes each, doing exactly that. And every week we'll offer a couple of brief PSAs suggesting how you might help your communities if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to do that. The first of these is American for the Arts, particularly their fund to support coronavirus rapid response, resources, and recovery for the arts and culture sector. So that's www.americansforthearts.org. The second organization is the Carl Brandon Society, carlbrandon.org. Their mission is to increase racial and ethnic diversity in the production of an audience for speculative fiction. So both really, really worthy. And if you can do something, throw a little scratch their way, that would be really great. So here we go. If you're here via Zoom, please mute your mic, but feel free to leave your camera on if you're so inclined, and feel free to use chat. Obviously, our Facebook Live friends can comment, but of course, we can't see your comments. Our guests tonight are Nisi Shawl and Barbara A. Barnett. And we're going to start with Barbara. Barbara A. Barnett is a Philadelphia area writer, musician, Odyssey Writing Workshop graduate, coffee addict, wine lover, and all-around geek. And I just want to say, Barbara, you are in very good company, especially with the last part. This is kind of a room full of geeks. Her short fiction has appeared in publications like Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet. After, I don't know, 30 years selling fiction, I have not been able to crack that market, so that's fantastic. Fantasy Magazine, Cast of Wonders, Intergalactic Medicine Show, Daily Science Fiction, and Flash Fiction Online. Outside of writing, she spent most of her career working for performing arts organizations, most recently as an orchestra librarian for the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music. You can find her online at babarnett.com. So, Barbara, take it away.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to be reading a story that appeared in Beneath Ceaseless Skies a few years back. It's called The Girl Who Welcomed Death to Svalgearyen. So content warning that there will be some death involved in this, but somebody once described this as a lighthearted take on death. So hopefully not a traumatic one for you all. Here we go. In the town of Svalgearyen, on the 33rd day of the months-long winter night, Grandma Merritt abruptly cast her knitting aside and marched toward the door. "It's my time," she declared, a pronouncement that elicited a whimper from Gunther, the bushy little sheepdog who had been curled up at her feet. Her granddaughter, Ada, set her own knitting down with far more delicacy, but also with a great deal of surprise. "Where are you going?" "Well," Grandma Merritt said as she heaved herself into her winter coat, "I can't die here, now can I?" Ada, having spent most of her 13 years in the city with her parents, did not know all the ways of Svalgearyen. As such, she saw no reason why Grandma Merritt should not die wherever she chose. More to the point, she saw no reason why Grandma Merritt should die at all. "It's much too cold and dark to go outside," Ada said. "Stay with me and Gunther by the fire." Grandma Merritt pulled on her knit cap with a harumph, each woolen glove with a grunt. Her scarf went on with a solemn sigh. "It's my time, child. You can argue with trolls and thumb your nose at the north wind, but there's not a one alive who can argue with death." And with that, Grandma Merritt opened the door. A draft tried to sneak in past her, but dying or not, Grandma Merritt would have none of that inside her house. She shooed the draft back into the cold where it belonged and shut the door behind them both. "Not a one alive who can argue with death," Ada muttered. She stomped to her feet and snatched up her coat. Like Grandma Marit, she pulled on her hat with a harumph, each glove with a grunt. Her scarf, though, went on with an indignant sniff. We'll just see about that. Ada hurried outside into the snow, Gunther trotting at her heels. The draft tried to sneak in past them as well, but Ada swatted it aside. Best let me use that fire if you're not going to, the draft said in a whining whistle. You don't fool me. Ada shut the door behind her. You'll creep across the floor and blow out our fire. Gunther growled at the draft, all courage and bristled fur. But when the draft responded with a nip at his tail, Gunther yelped and dove into the nearest snowbank. Oh, Gunther, Ada said, pulling him out by his hind legs. There's no need to be afraid of a silly little draft. Gunther shook the snow off his coat, then gave a short bark that said he quite disagreed. Ada looked up and down the lane, but Grandma Marit had already disappeared into the darkness. The only movement came from flickers of firelight sneaking out of neighbors' windows. The darkness groaned in annoyance at the tittering flickers, who flitted up and down the sides of the box-like wooden homes, offering glimpses of vibrant reds, greens, blues, and yellows. The flickers skipped over the ground and tickled Ada's feet, even through her heavy boots. Ada stifled a giggle. Stop that, she said, and wagged a finger at them. We need your help to find Grandma Marit. The flickers bounded across the snow. Ada feared they would run away altogether, but a bark from Gunther put a stop to their fluttering. The flickers formed a halo around a footprint in the snow, a footprint so distinctively blocky that it had to be Grandma Marit's. Ada clapped in triumph. Thank you! The flickers scattered in a burst of laughter. No, Ada cried, chasing after them. She tried to scoop them up in her hands, but the flickers slid through her gloved fingers, tickling and twittering all the while. Gunther barked in alarm. The flickers squealed and haloed another footprint, but just as quickly scattered again. More worrisome than their teasing, though, was what had prompted Gunther's bark. Ada followed the sheepdog's gaze to where the wind and the snow were dancing together, twirling each other about in a spirited spring-like that would soon sweep Grandma Marit's footprints away. Help us, please, Ada said to the flickers, before her tracks are gone. Gunther let out another bark. Once more the flickers squealed, haloed a footprint, and scattered. Gunther, Ada said, struck by an idea. You're a sheepdog. You can herd them. Gunther cocked his head, as if he had momentarily forgotten he was a dog at all. Then he barked, and barked again. He ran around the flock of flickers, corralling them and woofing commands. The flickers obediently haloed Grandma Marit's footprints, one by one. Ada followed the flickers from halo to halo, footprint to footprint. With every step, the snow sucked in her boots with a flump, then let them go with a flap. Finally, Grandma Marit's sturdy, squarish form came into view. Grandma Marit, wait! Grandma Marit plunged ahead, cheeks puffing, far too much determination in her steps for one who had it in her mind to die. By the time Ada and Gunther caught up to her, their cheeks were puffing as well. Ada's breath came out in playful white clouds, Gunther's in ones as bushy as his tail. Grandma Marit's breath, however, floated off in the wind before finding any form at all. You should take Gunther home and feed him, she told Ada. He must be getting hungry. Ada matched Grandma Marit's heavy-footed strides. Gunther had the dinner leftovers and all the bits I threw him before then. Ha! Grandma Marit's sneeze-like exclamation blew a hole straight through the snow at her feet. I knew you wouldn't eat your lutefisk. Please tell me where you're going, Grandma Marit. Why can't you die at home? Why must you die at all? Grandma Marit grumbled something under her breath. Your parents have taught you nothing, I see. Nothing about Svalgearyen. I can't die here, so I'm going to meet death on the town border. That's the law. But why? Cheeky child with all your questions. It's just the way things are. Your grandpa Olaf met death at the border. My parents met death at the border. My parents' parents met death at the border. And so I will too. But you can argue with trolls and thumb your nose at the north wind, but there's not a one alive who can argue with the way things are. Well, Ada said, we'll just see about that. They made their way uphill out of the fjord that housed the heart of Svalgearyen. Ada trumped, shoulders squared and head held defiantly high. Grandma Marit trudged, shoulders crouched and head jutting forward. Gunther, with his bushy tail wagging, ran a few paces ahead to keep their flock of flitters lighting the way. The further they climbed, the more the north wind screamed across the hillside. Ada yanked her cap down tighter. Must the wind blow at us so? I must, the north wind roared. In a single gust, he snatched up the flickers and flung them across the hillside. Then, with another roar and another gust, the north wind snatched up Gunther and tossed him as well. The little sheepdog tumbled downhill, head over tail, yelping and howling until a rock halted his fall with a horrible smack. Gunther! Ada dashed down the hillside, with Grandma Marit huffing and puffing close behind. Gunther lay whimpering beside the rock, trembling flickers tangled in his hair. His neck was twisted at an angle so unnatural that he saw his tail in full view for the very first time. Grandma Marit drew herself up as tall as her stocky frame would allow and thumbed her nose at the north wind. Can't let an old woman go meet death in peace, can you? Had to go and kill my dog, too, didn't you? I'm terribly sorry, the north wind said, and faded to an insincere whisper. He's not dead. Ada tried to turn Gunther's head round right, but he let out a bark so anguished that Ada cringed and drew her hands away. Gunther's just hurt, that's all. He'll be dead as soon as we find death, Grandma Marit said. She gave Gunther a sad, gentle scratch behind the ears. Death's a cruel one, isn't he, Gunther? Not letting us die at home, warm in bed. I still don't understand why you have to die at all, Ada said. Why not tell Death you're not in the mood to die just yet? Because Death's not a part of Svalgearyen. He's waiting across the border. Besides, child, it's my time. Gunther's now too. But if we just... You can argue with trolls and thumb your nose at the north wind. Grandma Marit hoisted Gunther into her arms, but her knees had other ideas. They buckled beneath her, sending her and Gunther toppling forward into a mound of snow. But there's not a one alive who'd want to go on living like this. Ada's "we'll just see about that" stopped short of her tongue and promptly retreated to the confines of her throat. When had Gunther become too heavy for Grandma Marit to lift? Ada helped Grandma Marit to her feet, then gathered Gunther into her arms. They walked unsteadily on, silent and shivering, nothing more than the dim flickers in Gunther's hair to light the way. The ground soon leveled off, trading its upward slope for a grove of spruce trees capped with snow. The trees leaned into each other like tall, sturdy loggers huddling for warmth. Then Ada spied what they were huddling around, the slithering orange and red, the curling dance of smoke, the crackling with which it sang. Look, she said to the quivering ball of fur in her arms that was Gunther, a fire! And a troll, Grandma Marit grumbled. You won't find one without the other in the woods. As they drew closer, Ada saw that Grandma Marit was very right indeed. What had looked at a distance to be a thick-set spruce was not a tree at all, but a troll sitting on a log. The burly creature possessed a fat, round belly and a bulbous-tipped nose near as long as Ada's forearm. His ears resembled giant saucers with an unappetizing dish of hair and earwax plopped in the middle. Ada tried not to cringe at his wet fur scent. Oh, ho, ho, what is this? The troll bellowed upon seeing them. We're just passing through, Grandma Marit said, pointing to a path that led into the woods. You pay us no mind. Oh, ho, ho, not without gold you don't. The troll heaved himself off his log and blocked the path. Pay the toll or become my dinner. Ha! Grandma Marit's exclamation cleared a trail through the snow between her and the troll. We don't have any gold, and you don't have it in you to eat an old woman going to meet her death. The little one looks tasty, the troll said. And the dog. Ada winced. Gunther whimpered. The flickers tied in his hair wailed and whined. Grandma Marit, on the other hand, looked ready to try wrestling the troll to the ground. There had been a time when she could have, and she had the scars to prove it. But now, Ada couldn't help but notice how the wrinkles in Grandma Marit's face had all but swallowed those scars whole. If Grandma Marit couldn't even lift little Gunther anymore, how was she going to wrestle a troll? Please, Ada said, let's go home and not argue with... The only place I'm going is to meet death. Grandma Marit spit at the troll's feet, where her saliva promptly solidified into an icy gob. And no one's getting eaten along the way. Oh, ho, ho, the troll said in a bellow to rival the north wind. I'll warn you one more time. Pay the toll or become my dinner. The north wind, not one to be outdone by a troll, responded with a gust that reduced the troll's fire to only a few scattered embers. Gunther's flickers, however, had learned from their first encounter with the north wind and held fast to the sheepdog's hair. With his point made, the north wind quieted down and drifted on his way. The flickers let out weary squeaks of relief. The fire's dying embers answered with peeps of their own, giving Ada an idea. You silly troll, she said. So much bluster and all it's gotten you is a blown-out fire. You can't very well cook anyone for dinner without a fire, now can you? The troll's shaggy head dropped in defeat. Oh ho ho, you're quite right, this won't do at all. I need that fire. These flickers here could probably help relight it, Ada said, but only if you let us pass without eating us. An excellent idea, the troll said with a clap of his huge, hairy hands. Put them in my fire and you can be on your way. Gunther barked, prodding the flickers into action. They leapt into the smoldering remains of the troll's fire, where they exchanged excited chitters with the embers. Soon the flickers and the embers were flittering about each other and bursting into full flame. Oh ho ho, I owe you my thanks. The troll shooed a stray flicker into a lantern that had been sitting beside his log. Take this, please, the woods are terribly dark. He started to hand the lantern to Ada, but paused when he saw that she couldn't very well carry both Gunther and the lantern. He scratched a waxy ear, clearly confused as to what to do about such a predicament. For a troll, Grandma Merritt said, taking the lantern from him, you're not entirely dumb. Oh ho ho, why thank you, the troll said far too proudly. Ada and Grandma Merritt started down the path into the dark, quiet woods, where the scent of spruce and snow hung heavy in the air. Grandma Merritt regarded Ada with one bristly, questioning eyebrow raised. You can argue with trolls and thumb your nose at the north wind, Ada said, but there's not a one alive who can cook someone for dinner without a fire. Grandma Merritt patted Ada's wool-covered head with a wool-covered hand. You're learning, child. Ada smirked, quite pleased with herself, but the further they walked, the less pleased she grew. In fact, she grew most displeased with herself. She may have outsmarted a troll, but Grandma Merritt was still on her way to meet death. And by outsmarting the troll, I helped her on her way, Ada thought in dismay. Perhaps I outsmarted myself as well as the troll. I'd ask why you're so glum, Grandma Merritt said, but I know. You think I didn't try to talk your grandfather out of going to meet death when his time came? Ada buried her nose in Gunther's hair to stifle a sniffle. Don't you dare cry, she told herself. Your tears will freeze to your cheeks and Grandma Merritt will die disappointed in her foolish granddaughter. There's not a one alive who can argue with death, Grandma Merritt said, her voice unusually sad and gentle. I know because I tried. They continued on in silence, their resignation imprinting the snow as heavily and deeply as their boots. Despite the cold, Ada's cheeks flushed hot. Her chest grew so sore and tight that it became hard to breathe. She felt as if an entire clan of trolls was sitting upon her. And just when she thought she could go no further without bursting into tears, Grandma Merritt stopped and placed a hand on Ada's shoulder. Just ahead, the tree branches formed an archway over the end of the forest path. This is it, Grandma Merritt said. This is where Svalgearyen ends and where we say goodbye. The woman standing beside Ada no longer looked like strong and sturdy Grandma Merritt. The woman was sad and wrinkled and could no longer wrestle a troll to the ground. Her thin lips quivered in the cold, and her teeth disturbed the otherwise quiet night with a percussive chatter. This was a woman who shouldn't have been forced to trudge here in the snow and see her dog's neck broken along the way. She deserved to die at home, warm in her bed with Gunther curled up at her feet. Where we say goodbye. The weight pressing on Ada's chest scampered off behind a tree, where it hid from the icy resolve that had taken its place. We'll just see about that. Ada ran through the archway, Gunther whimpering in her arms. Grandma Merritt hurried after them, scolding all the way, but Ada barely heard. If she had to lose Grandma Merritt and Gunther, it wasn't going to be here, surrounded by darkness and snow. Only a few steps out of the woods, Ada halted and let out an awestruck gasp. A white-sheeted landscape lit by moonlight stretched out before her. Beyond it lay a great black glacier, darker than the night. Only it wasn't ice, Ada soon realized. A ripple passed through the dark mass, as if she had startled it by bursting out of the woods. The mass moved toward her, undulating across the snow, swallowing the moonlight in shadow. The closer it drew, the colder the air became, until Ada felt as if she were swallowing ice with every breath. Gunther howled. Grandma Marit sucked in a thin, frightened breath. They were standing before death. I don't want to argue with you, Ada said, trembling, but I do want to ask you a question. The shadowy expanse contracted and expanded, as if blinking in surprise. A question? The voice boomed across the night, yet Ada found it comforting in a sad, cold kind of way. It's been a long time since anyone from Svalgearyen only wanted to ask me a question. Some try to argue, others are just angry, but most simply accept it when it's their time. Well, it's not my time, Ada said, and I'm not from Svalgearyen, so I would like to know. If Grandma Marit and Gunther have to die, why can't they do so at home where it's warm and comfortable? Death let out a sigh that blew snowdrifts across Ada's feet. Because I'm not welcome in Svalgearyen. That's goat droppings and troll swill, Grandma Marit said. Everyone's welcome in Svalgearyen. Not me, Death said. He sounded more like an old dog kicked one too many times than something to be feared. Your ancestors made it very clear when they settled in Svalgearyen. We'll not have death darkening our new home. We've come here to leave all that behind. Only you can't, you see. People always know when it's their time, and they get tired. And people in Svalgearyen would get so tired that they just lay down in the snow and slept until they became blocks of ice. They were quite upset when they thawed out in the spring. So they started meeting you here, Ada said, surprised at the pity she felt for the great dark mass before her. That they did. They wouldn't welcome me in, but they couldn't argue when their time came either. No one can. Rage gets in, he will never get out again, Grandma Marit said. I can see why people would get tired. I'm quite tired myself. Well, we could. Ada looked at Grandma Marit, who offered her a somber smile and a nod. Ada swallowed hard, then addressed Death. We'll welcome you to Svalgearyen. Death's shadowy darkness rippled. You will? We will, but... Ada hesitated. Death seemed so agreeable, but he was still Death. You'll let Grandma Marit and Gunther go home first, won't you? Of course I will, Death said, and the air around them no longer felt so icy. I think we even have time for a warm cup of cocoa. Then welcome to Svalgearyen, Ada said. She, Gunther, and Grandma Marit started toward home, with Death billowing close behind. When they reached the heart of Svalgearyen, gasps and curses sounded from within the homes they passed. One man threw open his door and staggered toward them, a hatchet buried in his head, held in place by a frozen clump of blood. Ada's stomach wriggled at his rotten scent. Grandma Marit muttered something about the ones too exhausted to make it to the border. As soon as Death's shadow fell over the man, he dropped to the snow dead. What have I done, Ada thought. Regret tried to sneak its way into her heart, but it retreated upon hearing a whimper of longing from poor little backwards-headed Gunther. He looked up at Ada with pained, watery eyes that told her she had done the man a favor. Soon enough, they were home. Grandma Marit propped up in bed with a mug of hot cocoa. Gunther curled at her feet. Ada nestled in a bedside chair. Death coiled a shadowy tendril around his own mug of cocoa. They all watched in fascination as he absorbed the chocolatey liquid into his dark nothingness. Inviting Death over for cocoa, Grandma Marit said with a weak laugh. You can argue with trolls and thumb your nose at the north wind, but there's not one alive who can claim a granddaughter quite so crazy as mine. She winked at Ada, who smiled tearfully in return. As much as Ada still wanted to argue, she knew the time for it was past. Grandma Marit set down her cocoa, gave Gunther one final scratch behind the ears, then lay back and pulled the blanket to her chin. It's my time. Death cast his shadow over the bed. Grandma Marit breathed her last with a peaceful sigh, Gunther his with a contented murmur. Ada, though, offered no breath at all. It had gotten tangled up with the grief welling in her chest. If you'll excuse me, Death said, there are a few others in Svalgearyen I should go and visit. Ada nodded, too numb to speak. Thank you for the cocoa, Death said, and rippled his way out of the house. Outside, more gasps and curses sounded. mingled with an impatient utterance of, "It's about time." Upon hearing the latter, Ada's breath finally worked itself loose. She stood, patted Gunther's backwards head, then clasped Grandma Merritt's cooling hand. "You can argue with trolls and thumb your nose at the north wind," Ada said. "But there's not a one alive who can argue with death." She collapsed into a chair beside the fireplace, feeling more like a heap of sniffles than a human girl. The rocker where Grandma Marrett should have been sitting was empty and still. The patch of rug where Gunther should have been curled up was threadbare and worn. Their presence, though, was so strong that Ada half expected Gunther to bark and Grandma Marrett to rise from bed and chide her for sulking. And so, with a fond, sorrowful sniff, Ada took up her grandmother's discarded knitting and began a new row of stitches where Grandma Marrett's had ended. That's the end.
Yay! Applause, applause.
That was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, I need to pause, get recentered, take a breath. Thank you. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. All right, here we go. On to Nisi. I'm really happy to have Nisi here on a return visit. Our friendship goes back quite a ways. I don't want to tell you how far back, but we were classmates at Clarion West in a different century, it turns out. We became friends early on in that kind of petri dish of creative energy, and we've remained good friends to this day. Nisi is an African-American writer, editor, and journalist. They're best known for their science fiction and fantasy dealing with gender, race, and colonialism, including the Nebula finalist novel Everfair. And if you have not had the pleasure of reading that book, you should check it out. It's a great book. Their most recent editing project is New Suns, original speculative fiction by people of color, which I'm really happy to say just won a Locus Award. It seems like every time I turn around, Nisi's picked up a new award, an award nomination, or some other interesting career milestone. Their most recent fiction publication is the collection Talk Like a Man, part of PM Press's Outspoken Author series. And in that series, she's in the company of folks like Marge Piercy, Kim Stanley Robinson, Karen Joy Fowler, Samuel R. Delaney, Elizabeth Hand, and other luminaries. They live in Seattle, where they also write nonfiction for the Seattle Times and the Seattle Review of Books. So over to you, Nisi.
All right. Thank you, Dan. So as people who have come to readings of mine before know, I start out with a song. This is a song, well, Yeats wrote this poem called Sally Gardens, based on what he said was a half-remembered ballad. So I'll sing a verse of that. The story, I can't read the whole thing. It's too long. It's a lot of words, but it's almost 9,000 words. It is called I Being Young and Foolish, and it will be published as part of the Stone Sword Table Anthology, which is a bunch of stories trying to subvert the Arthurian mythos. Down by the Sally Gardens, my love and I did meet. She passed the Sally Gardens with little snow white feet. She bid me take love easy as the leaves grow on the tree. But I, being young and foolish, with her would not agree. Nia rose from her boat's bench smoothly, a skyward pour of milk. Her cat had made up their mind. Steady though she stood, her boat bobbed slightly in the rippling water. The boatman hunched uneasily against the bright wind, which fluttered Nia's sleeves and the ends of her headcloth, and pushed her robe of undyed wool against her chilled body. Nia reminded herself that this lake was reputed shallow, no more than a couple of fathoms at its deepest in its center. And here among the reeds at the island's edge, even with the wetness of winter's onset, she ought surely to be able to wade ashore, as Ode could leap the little distance, if only they would leap it. On the beak of the boat's painted prow, Ode wriggled their gray-striped hindquarters, teetered their triangular head down, up, down, and jumped. King Bear's command that she come to study here was in accord with her chosen destiny, the knitting together of the world's webs. A sigh-released breath Nia had not known she held. Then the rustling of dried grass told where Ode walked ahead. Carefully, using an oar to provide balance, Nia stepped from the boat into the water's freezing cold. Only 2 paces, and she reached the rock where her cat had landed, splashing the stone's lichened sides as she climbed to its low, flat top. She looked back. She would need her boots. Her slippers were wet, and the bottom of her gown, despite her curdling it. "My bundle, pitch it here." The boatman frowned, then did as bidden. She caught his toss and ignored his face. In these strange northern lands, Nia had come to see such expressions as her common due, and they were certainly less frightening than some smiles she'd had to face on her journey. Or, for that matter, back in Nakasongola. The boatman turned away obediently enough and worked his oars, gradually diminishing from sight. Once he'd gone, the music of the land welled up to fill her. Wind rushing, waves lapping, birds crying. Stilling, she listened wider, clouds blowing above, so reliable, so welcome. And there, the soft brush of Ode's tail against plants growing along the path they took. A narrow path made by the shy Cymru deer coming down to drink. Nia followed the path upward to a hazel copse where golden leaves littered the ground and the empty fragments of split shells. A good burial site. Ode stretched contentedly along a low, flexible limb waving from the grove's queen tree, grooming a dainty forepaw. Nia approached them, hand held out to caress the cat, but stopped. Percussion interrupted the land music's flow, wood on wood. A door banging open, banging shut. She dropped her hand and faced the sound's source, but nothing further came from its direction. She walked toward what she had heard, hesitantly. A new path, human broad, the smell of a smoky fire hanging over it. This must be the way to the hut King Bear had described. And so it was. Soon a clearing appeared before her, and a small building, stone, but constructed in the Cymru style, on one side, and a brushwood wall on the clearing's other side. A beautiful man of middle years standing in its center. Nia met his pale eyes and felt her current intensify. The man spoke. "Well that you come." He wore a dark belted mantle, its hood pushed back to show straight brown hair cut to the blunted knife of his jawline. His voice was odd, louder than a whisper, softer than it should have been audible 16 paces off. Nia gathered herself in. "You expected me?" The beautiful man came closer, nodding and curling his slender fingers. "Say rather that I hoped for you. King Bear's messenger arrived the day before last Sabbath, with word you had been advised to visit me, but that you had received this advice without committing to heed it." He spread his arms to show himself weaponless. "I'm right? You are the foreign sorceress?" "So they call me. If she had stayed in Nakasongola, she would by now be revered as a Mugunda. Unless, of course, she had been rejected, as had begun to seem more and more likely, which likelihood had led her to her present course of wandering the world to learn its many magics, and the misnaming of her that went along with that course. And who is this? The man's gray eyes were aimed over her shoulder. She whirled, but it was only Ode. My cat. He came with you all the way from Ethiopia? No, Ode didn't join me until I left Egypt. Ethiopia had not been the actual country of Nia's origin, but she let the error pass as she had learned to let pass so many errors. And you are Merlin, King Bear's magician. He did not have a tame air about him, did not seem any sort of courtier, but she supposed he must be the one she had been recommended to seek. Yes, to be sure. His disturbingly light eyes met hers again, and this time held them. Was that how her eyes appeared to others? You'll want to see where you will stay, and to take refreshment, or perhaps you fast. No. Neither of them moved. Once again it was Ode who tipped the moment's balance. Ignoring the magician, they dashed to the stone hut's threshold and abruptly halted. Wards? No, well, perhaps. Door wards would make sense, but the sudden scent of fish blood was most likely what had stopped Ode there. Inquiringly, they raised their nose. A straw sack hung wet and glistening from a peg in the whitewashed wood of the door's jamb. Merlin, ahead of her, grinned and shrugged. You'll share it with me? Fresh-caught trout make for a fine dinner. Entering the twilight of the hut's interior, Nia felt only the weakest resistance, like a bubble waiting to pop. Wards, but apparently she had been classified as a friend and allowed to pass. A raised platform near the hearth bore a heap of heather. Your bed, said the magician. Not our bed. She would be warm enough, but where will you sleep? I will sleep in the woods, or the yard, or the loft. Nia noted the order of his listing. Presumably, it indicated preference. No, Merlin was not tame. However, he was extremely civilized for a man of these parts. Christianity had been rife since her voyage over the Tyrrhenian Sea, but he didn't appear to practice Christianity. The hut's walls bore no crosses, no bones or hair stolen from the bodies of dead ancestors. The fish were quickly baked in a mud made fragrant with sweet herbs and served on a board lined with rare greens, fresh, tender sorrel leaves, which tasted wonderful. Both mead and beer accompanied the meal. Hospitality had ceased to be much of a problem for Nia once she left behind the dark-skinned peoples who viewed her albinism askance. As she had been told, the further north she traveled, the more acceptable her pallor, the more welcome her assistance with herbal formulae and other simple spells. She only had to share the most childish of enchantments to pay her way. They ate in the open air, seated on a felled oak a few feet uphill. Nia noted that a wind blowing from the direction of the lake afforded better hearing than could have been expected. No surprise visitors. Good planning. Ode sat quiet as a hunting dog and watched every bite of fish into her mouth. You have a pet also? She asked the magician. I have a serpent, Maka. The cool weather of the year's ending makes her sluggish and lessens her appetite. She'll still be digesting the rat she caught yestermorn. Nia bent and laid her baked mud shell on the ground for Ode, and they began to pick cautiously at the slivers of flesh she'd left clinging to its inside. The magician laid his shell beside hers. Come, I'll show you my workings, while the light's good. They returned to the hut. Was it larger now? Yes, definitely. It was larger outside and in. That stair in the corner was new. She climbed it behind him to another floor, a wooden floor, and on it a narrow table running the room's length. Windows at the room's far end showed a flowering hedge dividing a green hillside pasture, sheep grazing under blue heavens. But this hut stood in the midst of a forest. Where? This is my mother's land, Svalgearyen. And you should ask when as well. Hadn't she heard that Svalgearyen was forested too? When? In times to come. Without realizing, she had crossed the room, drawn to the unlikely scene outside. Now she turned her back on it to stare at him, to deny what he had said. The future does not exist. Everything exists. Gazing at Merlin over a table laden, she saw now, with shining metal boxes and thick glass bowls and colorful waxen effigies and all manner of curious items, Nia knew with utter certainty that Ode had been guided aright. She needed to stay here and exchange teachings, powerful ones, with this impossible, beautiful man. She needed to know the world as he knew it. And so she formally asked him to instruct her, and he formally took her on. She went to her bed of heather alone that first night and got up from it the same way. Ode roused her when it was early morning. Outside the hut's walls, the still sunken sun's light whispered the air awake. A moment's wait in the clearing and the trail down to the hazels formed itself out of thinning shadows. She and Ode followed it, and under the queen's branches she sought its roots with softly thrusting fingers, excavated the finest of the roots' tendrilings, and ate them. She knew from previous repasts that these northern webs became less active as the year's cold came on. Nonetheless, it was Nia's practice to consume as soon as she could some sample of the fungal lace linking together the flora of whichever woods she lived in. Another quarter, and it would be time for sowing. A lingering redstart called her deeper into the forest to where oak ruled the hillsides. Like her, surely, this little bird was a far traveler. Unlike her, it had returned to where it began, though soon it would leave again. She'd met a redstart once on the shore of Lake Nalubale. Redstarts did not love the North's cold winters. Remain here, she instructed Ode. They didn't, but neither did they accompany her as she sought for the singing, slipping off instead on a mission of their own. She was able to approach the bird alone. Singing serenely despite her presence, the redstart balanced on a high, near-leafless sprig jutting up from a young attendant tree. Nia coaxed him to her hand. "Tell my auntie I am well," she crooned. Find her where the shorebirds flock, casting her net from my uncle's boat, or resting in the shade of the iroko trees which our ancestors seeded there, the place we call Nakasongala. You will know her because she shines like me." She released the bird. He perched a moment more on her thumb and flew off southward. Higher up and higher in, she found the queen of these oaks, and again ate from among the roots. The taste was fine, but the hazels would be better for burying. Circling wide, she came last to the silver trunks of the beech trees, performed the same actions there, and came to the same conclusion. As Nia returned to the hut, mist closed around her like a memory. Out of the enveloping whiteness, Ode appeared, joining her as if they'd never left her side. The trail weakened. Nia relied on her burgeoning sense of the countryside to guide her back to the hut. Merlin greeted her at its door. "You touch the land," he pronounced. "The land touches me, breathes me, drinks me, draws me in, lets me out," she thought. All the land and air and ocean she'd passed between here and Lake Nalubale did so now. The strength of her magic depended on this intermingling, her magic's strength and growth. She wandered in its service. "Come." The magician fed her a cup of dried and toasted grains mixed with hazelnuts and goat's milk. They must have been procured from an off-island farm because she'd seen no sign of a farm nearby this morning. With his food, Merlin brought forth the question she'd been expecting since they met. "Aren't the people of Ethiopia black of visage?" "Most of us," she answered. Like devils she'd heard her race described. But I've been as you see me from my birth. What of your parents? Ode turned away from the pinch of grains Nia offered them, uninterested. Both my parents are dead. I never knew them. I'm sorry. I never knew them, she repeated. My aunt and uncles who cared for me tell me my mother and father were quite normal in how they looked. She licked off the grains Ode had spurned and reached for the napkin to wipe her hand. The magician held it. She tried to tug the napkin away. He kept his hold tight, his gaze on her hand, on her skin. Those in your village thought you a witch because you were not as they. Indeed they had. But rather than respond so, to answer what had been stated, not asked, Nia reached with her other hand to lift that tucked chin and raise Merlin's eyes to meet her own. He stared without blinking. A seeing was on him. For 5 long beats of her blood, Nia cradled the magician's jaw in her steady left palm. Then he jerked and drew back. He staggered to his feet, kicking a table leg. Bowl skittered to the table's edge. What had frightened him? Something seen? Her experience with other tutors had taught Nia not to pry early on in a relationship. She would wait for whatever explanation was offered. I'm sorry, said the magician again, and that was all she got from him for the moment. One more section. The quarter passed, 7 days. A pattern emerged. While the sun hung above the horizon, she went about fishing, foraging for berries, nuts, mushrooms, and other provender, and harvesting herbs it would be helpful to have over the winter. As evening dimmed and sank the sun, Merlin called her to him to teach her, in the ephemeral room above the ground floor, or in a cave opening in the slope behind his hut. He showed her trays crawling with people as small and purposeful as ants, opened books filled with images which moved while she watched them, then returned to their starting places when she looked away. He blinked slow as Ode in approval of her ability to sit motionless as a heron through a lesson on creating new homes for the future to live in. That brought a troubling bout of smugness to her. Stillness was the first skill the trees had taught Nia. Tools for digging rested against the hut on the side opposite its entrance. On the 7th day, after gathering a pan of rose hips off a wild hedge the oak trees showed her, Nia began her grave. She left the full pan on the table for Merlin to prepare as he would, shouldered shovel and pick, and went to work. The hazel's roots parted easily for her. By midday, the hole was deep enough. She set about widening it. Ode watched her from atop the little hill of dirt she'd cast up. Only watched. Their part would come soon. Tonight. She finished well ahead of time, even allowing herself a trip to the brook to bathe before returning to the hut to eat. The rose hips steeped in warm water. They would be a tea or a syrup then, to be consumed later. The meal itself consisted mainly of roots, but these had come in trade from farmers' crops and gave Nia no knowledge. What little they had once possessed, Merlin had peeled off with a knife and boiled away. There was much for him to learn. He had yet to ask her to teach it, or to grant him any other favor. The evening study session commenced as usual, though in a new venue. A blooming bower, a summerish arch of flowers with 2 seats of living wood. The method of the bower's conjuration was Merlin's chosen topic. He ignored her attempts to lure him onto others until the lesson's end. For a moment, both of them sat in darkening silence. The magician plucked a spray of sweet-scented bryony and plated it with another of honeysuckle. You'll wear these during your burial this night, he said. He knew. Who told you? We have a similar ritual in these lands, but for men. In the spring. As near to an answer as the magician ever gave, he twisted the ends of his plate together to form a wreath and presented it to her. Here, shall I accompany you, or is this working solitary? I won't be alone. Ode attends me. They'll finish my burial for me, and in the morning they'll begin my excavation. But I'm sure they'd welcome your help. She donned the wreath over her headcloth and proceeded with him to the hazel grove. Her grave looked bottomless in the gloaming. She half reclined in it as if in an oversized Italian bath. With Merlin's aid, the earth-covering Nia rose quickly. Her white-draped arms submerged themselves in the soil for a final time. You'll come to no harm. Not the least, she assured him. Already, the fungal threads of her comrades twined around her feet, tickling open the pores of her naked ankles. You may safely cover my headcloth in no more than the chanting of a pair of recipes. Ode will know exactly when. The flowers? They too. The magician recited the instructions he had given her for midnight travel between distant mountaintops, while filling the grave high as Nia's chin. Ode patted her cheeks with velvet gentleness and pawed rich loam from behind her line of sight to lie against her ears. Merlin's recitation became too muffled to distinguish, and her attention became diffuse, opening out into the wood's underground system, the slow routes of the tree's shared awareness, spreading the light, the hum, the liquid proclamation of life, shutting it down, retracting it, drawing off the precious power to store it within the earth, within her bones, the quiescent essence. Night was a dance without steps, without movement of any kind. Morning came, a smear of sunlight, a reddening of her eyes' lids. She lifted them and focused on Ode's furry face, their pink and silver tongue licking the scum of dirt from her newly exposed skin. Merlin's long hands scooped up the loose soil, imprisoning her neck and shoulders. But by the time she'd freed herself enough to look for more of him, he'd gone. And that's where I stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisi. I can't wait to finish it. All right. Well, that's it, folks. Another story hour. Two great authors, two terrific stories. Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you, Nisi. And thank you all for joining us again here at Story Hour. Next week, we have S.G. Brown, and Sally Wiener Grota. Meanwhile, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and stay safe. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.